Aaron, you're working in the intersection of AI and games, which is a very interesting combination. So, how about we start with a brief overview of what is Regression Games and what is the idea behind the company?
Sure. Yeah. And also thanks for taking the opportunity to chat with me today. So, yeah, Regression Games is a company that I founded in May of this year. And Regression Games is working on building a platform to make it easy to compete and build with AIs in games. And so the idea is that players, instead of actually playing in a game using like a mouse and a keyboard, what players are actually doing is writing code in AIs to actually compete in a game. And so you're controlling the characters in the game to, move around, get certain resources, complete objectives. And the idea is to have fun with, competing with AIs in these games. So
Gotcha. And why go in this direction? Why combining AI with games? Why did it resonate with you?
yeah, so my entire life I've been really interested in the space of both gaming and AI, and so I've always had that sort of competitive edge throughout my entire life. Like loved applying technology to games and basically just learning how to harness the power of technology to improve my gameplay. And so once I guess over the past year, me and my friends were talking about this idea of AIs in games.